Lennox and Parker, it's your girl, Christal Jordan, editor-in-chief, and I am back with another edition of Girl Talk. Today, my guest is a well-known entrepreneur. I've learned about her business sense and respect her for that, but she's also stepping into a new role of reality star and author. And so we're going to talk about all that with my guest today, Snoop. First of all, welcome to Lennox and Parker.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Christal.
Well, I'm excited about your first visit here. We're excited to have you. Like I said, I've known of you for years. I actually think I met you at an event, one of the openings for your restaurants here years and years ago.
Okay.
So you have been one of the people in this city that's known for putting things together and running successful businesses. What made you decide to step into the role of reality TV star when you already have so much success going on with business?
A couple of different reasons. Number one, like I've always wanted to get into like TV, film production. I just, have been so busy. Anybody out there that are restaurateurs, and they know that it's like very stressful. It's a very hands-on industry. And so I just never really had the time to. But recently I decided to franchise my brand, which I did back in 2020.
Okay.
Actually 2021, and I put franchisees in all of my locations just to be able to give me more free time to indulge in things that I'm more passionate about. So definitely stepping out on faith, in a brand new industry. And never really like seeing myself in front of the camera. Definitely thought I would be behind the camera. I've taken screenwriting course, and looking forward to, just educating myself more. But definitely see myself more as like director, executive producer versus, actress, So, but it was interesting. I definitely enjoyed it. How this all kind of came about is I am recently divorced. So last year I had announced my plans to divorce my ex-wife. And I just started kind of getting a lot of women, falling in my DMs and stuff. I was on a vacation, had a few drinks, and I was just like, man, I should do something similar to like Flavor of Love, and that was kind of how everything came about.
Okay. Well, I can't wait to get all into that because I know the book, you talk about that process too of like grieving something and moving on. But before we get into that, like I said, I've known you as being a successful businesswoman, and to have restaurants, I know that's not an easy business. We see them pop up, we see them close, So can you tell people maybe some of the things that people don't know? When people see a restaurant, they think, oh, they're getting to the money, everything is good. What are some things that people don't understand about the business of actually running a restaurant?
Oh, several different things. So number one, people just automatically think that like owning a restaurant comes off as like a sexy business, oh, wow, you got a restaurant to go to, free drinks, free foods, partying, etc. And yes, I've been able to take advantage of a lot of that. But like with a restaurant, there are a lot of expenses. And that's what people don't understand. You got a lot of money going into inventory. You got a lot of money going into payroll. You have drink by the bill taxes. You got state tax. You got employee taxes. I would say, most people probably don't even walk home with 50%, of their gross revenue. So you got a lot of money coming in and a lot of money going out. Generally, you have quite a bit of theft going on. And a restaurant is something that for the most part, like if you're doing it right, you really gotta like damn near live in that restaurant, be there, every day, every other day type situation, So, and I think that, just the level of work, the level of paying attention to detail is something that a lot of people don't take into consideration before they get into the restaurant business.
I definitely would agree with that. Now, we're in Atlanta, right? And I think, especially right after 2020, the fact that you've been able to remain successful and keep growing, because there are a lot of businesses that were not able to survive the pandemic, right? And probably really great businesses. It just was a difficult time.
For sure.
But there has been a surge and even like a reputation of Atlanta for having these businesses, specifically restaurants, that have really bad customer service. Can you speak? How do you handle that? Because a big part of your business is making sure that customers are happy when they leave. So what advice do you have for businesses, specifically restaurateurs that are having trouble with customer service complaints and that goes viral? And that's an issue. So what is your take on that?
That's such a good question. And I would agree with the opinion of a lot of people that, we do see a lot of lower levels of customer service, here in Atlanta. I think that number one, there's just so many restaurants going up that are just so similar. They put up a grass wall, a few booths
The
here,
Instagram
there.
selfie, yeah.
You know what I mean? Serving lamb chops, wings, and it's just like, what are you going to do to differentiate yourself? And one of the things they can start doing to differentiate themselves is giving good customer service. Like, I think that it's important to like travel, especially out of the country, because I always say when I go out of the country, I get the best top tier customer service, and then take those things back and make sure that you always have ongoing training. Once again, it's about being in your restaurant, and a lot of times when people are in their restaurants, the owners, they're in there drinking, they're in there partying, and they're not necessarily paying attention to what's going on in the business, There's a lot of fraternizing with the staff, from, various owners and things of that nature. But in owning a restaurant, there is an ongoing training process, that needs to happen, and somebody, be it the owner, the GM, the shift manager, needs to be touching tables and making sure that the customers are happy with the experience. But back to what I originally said with traveling, I just think that gives you a different lens and how you see things and how things are done in other places, so that you can transcend that back, to, your restaurant.
That's good advice. That's why I was like, let me get some business sense first before we get into the dating. Let's talk about how you've managed to be successful. So I think those are great tips. And do you want to let people know if they come to the city and they want to go?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So most of the people, I'm sure you guys are familiar with 2 Chainz. That's my business partner. We own Esco Restaurant and Tapas. So we have locations here in Atlanta, in Marietta, Georgia. We also have, we have a location in Dallas, Texas. We have one in Memphis, Tennessee, and then one in Columbus as well. So, that's where you guys can find us. Make sure y'all come holler at us.
That's what's up. Okay. I love that. One more question about that. What makes you a good business partner? Because you have a huge celebrity as a business partner, but I do know just from doing things, he definitely is on his P's and Q's. So what made him the perfect business partner for you?
I think the level of trust that he has in me to fully operate the businesses. He has totally just been able to take a back seat, and, trust that, what I say is what's best for the businesses and the company.
Nice. Okay. Speaking of partners, okay, we think of business partners, and that's a lot sometimes like a romantic partner because of the level of trust, right?
Right.
So my first question to you is, I'm looking at this trailer for Snooping for Love.
Yeah.
And I see that you are in, we got 20 young ladies
right.
all vying for your attention. And you mentioned that before when people learned that you were, going through a divorce, a lot of people were kind of putting their bid in. They must have liked the way they saw your ex be taken care of. So how do you approach just dating, especially after coming out of a marriage that people knew about? What was your first approach before the show to just how am I going to handle getting back out there and doing this?
I initially really was not thinking about getting out there. For me, I was still in a really big healing moment, from losing, my daughter a year prior to, starting to go into a divorce. But, as I was getting out there, I think one of the biggest things for me is like, and one of the hardest things is just like when you are already successful and people see the things is, how do you find somebody that, loves you for you, and also being that I have been through so many traumatic things and I have, this other layer of grief, it's not like I'm the person that my ex-wife met, which is somebody that totally had it together, mentally. So, it's just like, also finding somebody that is willing to be sensitive to those needs as well.
Yeah, that's got to be difficult in any situation, but specifically coming out of grief like that, right? So going into it with 20 girls that are excited to be on reality television.
Right.
And I say this about all the shows I see. I don't understand at this point, because of where we are as a culture, right? Everybody wants to be on reality TV. They want to promote their brand. They want to get their 15 minutes of fame.
Right.
Do you think that it's possible to meet someone? And I know you've already filmed this, so you have to go take us back.
Right.
When you started the process, did you honestly think that it was possible to find someone that would be authentic, knowing all the carrots that are out there if you're on television? Even if they don't even have to go through the process. They can just be a character that gets a lot of attention.
Exactly.
You know? And then,
exactly.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, yes, I do think it's possible. We did have some girls on the show that just would have never done anything like this before. And so that is what made me feel that way. Now, I would say that, so I was a part of the casting process as well.
Okay.
I am the creator of the show and and one of the co-executive producers on the show. And so I would say that being that I wore all of those roles, there were some people that I casted just because I did think that they would be good for TV.
Okay.
There were some people that I casted because I wanted to get to know better, and I thought that they would be good for me,
Okay.
So I do think that it is possible,
Okay.
but I do think that also because of where we are in 2025 and the culture, that there are many more people that are looking to just get their name out there, get a little, 10 minutes of fame or whatever the case may be. So it does make it a little bit more difficult when you do go this route to find somebody. But for me, I was willing to do it because when I got married, I felt like that was somebody that I was going to be with forever, that was really going to be there for me. And I was wrong, So it's like, okay, well, maybe I need a little help. Maybe I need to do something a little different, a little bit more unique to try to find love this go around.
Let me ask you this, because I've been married and divorced.
Okay.
Just got married again. So I know when I got married the first time, what I was looking for, very different than what I was looking for the second time around.
Right.
So what is Snoop attracted to after post-divorce, right? Because I'm sure you learned a lot, loved a lot, learned a lot, right?
For sure.
So what are the criteria now that might be different than they were when you first got married?
So for me, I think, and even in that last relationship, we both agreed that we were totally different people than who we were when we walked down the aisle. And I think the loss of my daughter really brought that on. And so when I initially got married, or prior to me getting married, I didn't really think about like losing anybody or just, I just assumed that the person I was marrying would be there for me, through thick and thin. And I had never lost anybody super, super close to me. My life was almost similar to a fairy tale, very successful, very well off. I had just purchased my dream home a couple years, before we had got married. Had a fleet of cars. Everything was, going very well. And so I didn't really think about, okay, well, make sure that you have somebody that's going to be there for you if things don't go so well. Of course, you just assume that that's going to be the case. And so I didn't make sure that I had somebody that was like totally healed from their own traumas, that was a good communicator, that it's just somebody that, we would still be in love if we had to live in a garage or in a shack, and then we just had the two of us. And so I think that's what's different for me, this go round.
Let me ask you this. There's reality shows. I was just doing a review of King's Court. And so when you have, very wealthy, successful, famous men, they tend to skew towards being attracted to women that may be younger, right? And it's very aesthetically driven. So I wonder, is it the same? I'm looking at you, I'm seeing all these 20 young, very beautiful girls. And I'm wondering, is your mentality, do you think it's equivalent, or does it correlate to what wealthy, successful men do? Or do you think it's a little bit different when you're dating?
I think in a sense, yes, but I would say generally I have dated women that are my age.
Okay.
I mean, you can't take away, from a mature woman that has life experience. But age is not necessarily as important to me as just having somebody that just truly loves me for me, that's going to be there. I will say I am very into the aesthetics and the look, but I would say, that there's also some very beautiful women that are, down to earth and really care about you and have substance, career goals and things of that nature as well.
Is there the tension with, because that's another thing we see a lot of times with men, like if a man is successful, he doesn't necessarily want a woman, or not all of them. Let me not generalize, but a lot of times her success and her career ambition is not as important because he has that. And he kind of just wants someone that is going to be excited about him. How do you see yourself with that? Is it because the whole alpha female, and a lot of times with a successful man, it's like, I don't really need you worried about your success. I kind of really want this to kind of be about me.
I would definitely say I was like that before.
Thank you for the honesty.
In my previous marriage, I do recall my ex-wife saying, hey, because I tried to push her, to, be a little bit more successful, be kind of who she was, before I met her. And she was just like, hey, there can only be one superstar in this family. You got it. I'm here to support you, in that role. I would say, I have learned to respect a woman that has her own, but I do also like to be very catered to. And I think maybe that is why a lot of men do like that, because, a busy woman that has her own career is not really able to cater to you as much. They're not really able to, iron your suit and your shirt and all that. Now, some of the ones that really know how to multitask can. I have a friend of mine, she's married and she is super supportive of her husband, and she also runs her own business.
Okay.
She calls herself the deluxe multitasker. Some women just can't do that, and I understand why a lot of women kind of prefer. But I do think, just me being a woman, I do think that when you are a woman that 100% plays that role and you don't have anything going on yourself, it leaves you at a disadvantage if that relationship were to end or something were to go wrong, because you don't have your own.
Right.
And so I do think it's very important for a woman to have her own, and just, for there to be some balance and for both people to kind of respect that.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And I appreciate your honesty with I do like to cater. So I'm always curious about people who have started one way and then made a change. So I know that you had a daughter.
Yeah.
So you obviously at one point were not in the LGBTQ community.
Right.
That transition for you, was that something that you always knew, or was that something that you learned about yourself later in life?
So it was not something that I always knew, like growing up, I had my little boy crazy, phases. My first experience with a woman was when I was 18.
Okay.
And it actually came about due to a man that I was dating at the time. And I actually speak about this in my book that was released on July 18th of this year. But so it kind of shocked me, how like this woman was able to make me feel, So I'm like, okay, well, maybe I do kind of like girls a little bit. And so after that situation, I was bisexual for maybe about a couple of years. And then I moved towards, just being a lesbian woman and haven't looked back ever since.
What was the biggest difference to you? Like, what was that? Because when that's a funny cautionary tale to men that want to suggest a woman to have a threesome. She may like it more than you.
Okay. Well, a lot of men, they feel like another woman can't take their woman, and
that's not true.
That is not true at all.
What was the feeling, if you can describe it for me, that let you know this is more comfortable for me?
For me, the sex was more enjoyable.
Okay.
2, I had like more of a friendship, in my relationship with a woman versus with a man. Just more in common. And I felt like I got more support, that it
Mm.
just was more loving than it was, when I was with a man.
Do you prefer to be the leader in the relationship?
I do, yeah.
Okay. That probably helped as well. Right.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a brief break, and because I want to come back and talk a little bit more about your book
Okay.
that you
All
just
right, cool,
released, because
cool.
I think it has a subject that a lot of people will be helped from. So we're going to take a break. Check out Snooping for Love, which is going to air this fall, but we're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk about who is Snoop. This is Lennox and Parker. Stay right there. We're coming right back. All right, we are back. This is Girl Talk, and we are having a conversation with Snoop. We talked about her new reality series, Snooping for Love, and we also talked a little bit about some things that she's experienced, some grief, some loss that she's experienced over the last few years that inspired her book. So, first of all, what made you decide? Because I know that can be very difficult, right? Grief of any type, death, divorce, those are both really heavy things. What made you decide to really just go in and share your experiences and talk a little bit more about it in a candid way to write a book?
So number one for me, I've always just kind of been an open book when it comes to a lot of the things that I've been through. I've shared with people and spoken on just being sexually abused, as a child. And just always just really kind of been an open book. So in 2020, I actually decided to write a book about my life. All of my friends always tell me, like, girl, your life is a movie, you need to write a book, or this needs to be a movie, etc. And so that is what inspired me to go ahead and start writing this book, just because of so many of the different things that I've been through. Now, I kind of got a little scared with writing it just because, everybody in this book is still alive, and it was like, well, I don't want to make this person feel this way, or I don't want to ruffle any feathers, or whatever the case may be. But when my daughter passed, I knew that it was like really time to do it, and just to be able to just have something to leave, that's like a legacy, for her and I. I also thought, like, my book is a 2-part book. So the first part, Who is Snoop? It's about my life, so it's more so an autobiography. And then the second part is a grief self-help book, which I thought was very necessary and very needed. One of the things that people always say is, like, everybody grieves differently, and you will never understand that until you actually go through grief yourself. You got some people that will go out here and just party their asses off. You got some people that will fall into depression. I saw how some people could become alcoholics, how some people could become drug addicted, and some people bottle it up and they become workaholics. So but I think that there is, and I don't care how many self-help books are put out there is no self-help book to grief. It's just something that's just very tough, on everybody.
When I think about grief and loss, when I'm talking about like death, because like I said, I've been through divorce, and divorce felt like death to me. But you think losing a child is probably, in my opinion, the most painful, and then next would be losing a parent, which all of us, will experience at some point in our life, because circle of life happens. And there's, I was talking to a friend of mine that lost her son, and it's hard to understand how a person could ever have a positive attitude about that, because it's such a such a painful thing. For you to, I love the fact that you said, I want to leave a legacy for her and I. How did you find, I guess, the strength to look at it that way? Because I could see how some people do not make it to the better place.
I can too, and for me, I, initially you just never think that you will, but I think that, for me, is I've tried to take on the mentality, and, it's a different feeling every single day, but I try to take on the mentality of, like, I have to live for my daughter because she no longer can. And of course, she was so young. She was 22 when she passed, and this was very unexpected. So I feel like as her mother, it's my responsibility to make sure that she still lives on this earth, and that there is a legacy, left for her.
That is beautiful. That is a beautiful way to think, and I think you're right. because writing this book even can help other mothers that may not
Mm-hmm.
be as strong,
Mm-hmm.
or may not have found that light.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think helped? What do you think helped you get to that place?
Uh, I think, I mean, of course, God, faith, having a mother that was also extremely close to my daughter and was
Mm-hmm.
grieving her just as much, as I was,
Mm-hmm.
who has also lost several family members in a very traumatic way, so could really relate. And just having a family that wanted to see me in a healthier and happier way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's what got there, as well as just we have to kind of decide, that we still want to live,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
we want to still have some happy moments, and I had originally joined a group for parents that have lost a child, because it is a definitely very unique loss, and I found myself having a lot of anger at first. People would compare it to losing their grandmother or
Mm-hmm.
their grandfather, or losing their, one of their parents. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, we're all going to lose our parents. It's definitely not something we want to think about. We're definitely going to lose our grandparents. They're
Right.
older,
Right.
but it wasn't until my daughter passed that I even questioned what happens to us when we leave here. I was just, yes, I heaven and hell, da 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 da, and that's that.
Yeah.
But I think when you when you lose a child, you want more details. Like,
Yeah.
where is my baby?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I think just going through all of those phases, grief is definitely, several stages, and they
Mm-hmm.
aren't linear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You go through them and then go back to another one. But you really have to just work even harder to like have like a healthy mindset
Yeah.
and mental.
Yeah.
Like. My friends, they check on me all the time, and they now say, like, how's your mental?
Mm-hmm.
That was never something that was asked of me, in the
Yeah.
past. So,
Yeah.
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 But you have to be very intentional to even want to go on.
So you don't want to. I agree with that. And that's still, like I said, even that is still admirable that you're able to talk about it. And I think when you do talk about things that are painful, it has no choice but to help other people, because there's so many people that need to hear from someone that, like you said, someone comparing, and I'm sure they're trying to help, but hearing from someone that can't relate can't help in the same way that someone that can.
I agree. I agree. Yeah,
So
I found
I
myself
applaud you.
gravitating to more people that
Yeah.
had that experienced the same unfortunate loss.
Yeah. So I applaud you for doing that, because with a book you can touch more people than you can meet. You know
For
what I mean?
sure.
So
For sure.
people can read that and get some help. Even they don't have to go out. If they're, they can find that. So I've heard that there are a lot of marriages that can't withstand that type of grief. And so I wonder, with you losing them so closely together, do you feel like that changed the trajectory of your marriage?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember very, very, actually, two of my best friends at the time, they had told me, this was actually literally the day after my daughter passed, and they both kind of said, I am really going to pray for your marriage, because I don't think that your wife is strong enough to, help you get through this. And me just kind of reading so much and doing so much research. Of course, that was I was seeing the statistics, and yes, I definitely think it's true. Even for couples where it was both of their child, this was not my ex-wife's daughter, and she did not have a super solid foundation, with my daughter, just because my daughter was an adult.
Yeah.
When we met, it wasn't like she was a young child, living in the home. So yeah, when we got married, I lost my daughter 8 months, after we got married.
Wow.
So it definitely, put an abrupt end to any honeymoon phase, that may have been going on. And I definitely think we grieved in different ways. I was grieving the loss of my only child, and she was grieving the loss of who I used to be and what our life used to be like.
That is very perceptive of you to be able to articulate that way. The idea of loving someone and giving up your heart when a lot of your heart has to be broken, it's healing. That's also courageous. Tell me about just being ready to be open to let somebody in when you're admittedly still dealing with both losses?
So I would say the loss of my marriage is not as heavy,
Right.
you know, anymore. And I think I remember saying, you know, with going through the grief of my daughter, you know, if I could lose my daughter, I could lose anybody. You know, I can get over the loss of anyone, you know, because that was, you know, somebody I actually birthed, the only person I've ever birthed into this world, you know, and who I had a very, very close relationship with. So I think that in a sense helped me get over my ex-wife, but of course, you know, no one gets married, you know, to get divorced, you know, and I poured a lot into that relationship. But, you know, I do feel as though I am so much further past it, you know, than I was, you know. Um, of course, you know, like I still live in a marital home and, you know, there are like a few memories and stuff like that. But honestly, you know, not as much. I don't really think about it as much, you know. Of course, you know, I feel like somebody that you married, you know, uh, like, of course, if I was to hear that she passed or something like that, you know, it would, you know, touch my heart, you know, but and with us, we weren't even able to have a conversation of closure. You know, there was some emotional, not physical, but emotional infidelity, you know, on her behalf that, you know, there were some graphic conversations going on through text message, you know, that I found. And I just think because of like everything